Thank you very much. And just while that's calling up, myself and Kerry were talking about something that we facilitated last year, and Kerry was in my group, and it was a very forthright group, is probably the best way to describe it. Isn't that right, Kerry? There was lots of very forthright opinions being stated, strong personalities, and about halfway through, Kerry said, "Oh, it's great to be in the grumpy gang," she said. And I thought, this is absolutely at the heart of what it is we want. We want people to be themselves and to not sugarcoat things, not to mask things, as you were saying, Kerry, not to make things palatable, but actually articulate things and express things and say what the reality of being somebody living with a condition or a disability or an illness actually is for them right then, there. And that it's not necessarily that Kerry or anybody else is the one true voice of any condition. But the thing is that sometimes you're the one true voice that's in the room at the time. So you don't necessarily need to feel you represent absolutely everybody else with that condition. But the thing is, if you're the one true voice in the room at the time, then you have to tell your own story and tell it with real authenticity. And I think that's really important. I have slides because obviously in academia you can't actually communicate without a deck of slides, but I'll try not to speak to them or talk through them. So what is public and that P word, patient, what is public and patient involvement? PPI is what it's described as. And really public involvement and how it is described is that it's research carried out with or by members of the public rather than to, about, or for them. And that I'm sure lots of you have probably heard about that. But sometimes people can get a little bit confused in terms of, well, what do you mean with and by people? And the thing is that oftentimes we're used to thinking about research in the orange part of the triangle there, about participation, where you are the person from whom data is being gathered. And this is a very laudable thing. It's a research can't happen without it, and so it's really important and laudable, but it's not what we're talking about here. And also when we think about engagement, where the researchers are telling, they're in broadcast mode, and they're telling you about what that they've found and what they're doing, that again is very useful and important, but it's not what we're talking about when we talk about involvement. Involvement is about a partnership. And it is about working together as partners to do either an aspect of research or a whole lot of different aspects of the research cycle. That might be about deciding, well, what questions are we going to ask and how are we going to ask them? It might be about how do we find the people to be involved as participants. It might be about how we actually disseminate this information. It might even be about how do we change policy? How do we actually change the way things get done in the world, using the information that we now have from a study. But it is about working in partnership. And I was at a thing last week where there was civil and public servants talking about partnership, but actually really they were talking about kind of bringing people into a room and asking them questions, and then the people go out of the room again so that they can make decisions. And I was saying, well, that's not really partnership. It's a bit like saying, oh yeah, well, we're going to get married, but basically I've already decided, what I want that person to do, and that they're going to come in order to do X, Y, and Z, and then they're going to leave again. That actually, no, that's not how a marriage works. Marriage is you both start at the same point, and hopefully you grow and develop together. And that's what a partnership is. So the people who have the lived experience might come in and actually start at a particular point, and they might grow and develop in the process. And so might the researchers. And actually, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but you shouldn't necessarily start with this idea of, right, okay, well, I need them for this bit, and basically, once they've done that bit, then they can go off out and let me get on with the proper job. That's not how it works. And the same is also true from the the public perspective as well. That, oh, I need the researchers to come in and do this bit for me. This is actually about real partnership. And it's got lots of other names, and it's got other allied terms as well. And I just flash these up in case you've come across other things and other ways of talking about it. Now, a lot of these things are slightly different or have a different kind of focus, but ultimately a lot of them lead to that kind of partnership between people living with a condition and also researchers. So what do researchers want from me? So I think the first bit about this is about what's actually driving a lot of this. And part of it that's driving it, and you won't be surprised by this, is money. Money is driving it, and I see Kerry nodding her head there. Money is driving it because funders are saying, we are spending public money, and therefore the public ought to have more of a role in what gets researched and how it gets researched. And that is absolutely fair enough. And the other part to it, I've spent a lot of years in the disability sector, and that right from the 1950s and 60s, when people started to think differently about disability, that it wasn't necessarily about the medical model, as it was called at the time, of trying to fix the person with a disability. It was about actually looking at the society in which people lived and understanding how that society disables people, rather than figuring that if we can just fix that individual, then suddenly everything gets better. So the thing is that people with disabilities themselves got very directly involved in the research, and it changed fundamentally the nature of how we do disability research. And that this kind of approach and this idea that there's not just one reality and there's not just one way of thinking and looking at things, and that there's loads of different ways and different types of truth and different types of ways in which you can actually question the views and perspectives of particular people, that all of that together has actually led to a much richer, more diverse, and much more interesting research landscape. So, as I said, money also makes a difference here. So the HRB have PPI as part of their strategy. Also, people like the Irish Research Council, who are supporting today, they are also putting money into this kind of partnership, as are Science Foundation Ireland, looking at what they call engaged research, and Horizon Europe as well, which is the big funding stream for European projects. That, again, makes a big difference across Europe in terms of money going into projects where people with a lived experience can be central to the process. And just to say that the Irish Research Council and the Health Research Board, the HRB, have actually developed a network of PPI Ignite offices, and I'm in the PPI Ignite office here in Trinity, but that there are offices in Galway, in UCD, in the University of Limerick, in RCSI, in DCU, and UCC. And that we have other partners as well, like the HSE, HRCI, IPOSI, Sphere, and so on. And you can see two other universities as well, Queen's and Maynooth, who are also involved in this. So there's a network there. Now, it's not just about fibromyalgia, it's not just about arthritis, it's not just about chronic pain, that this is across the board, and that it is health-related research. So again, it's not just about the particular condition that a person has, it's also about how health services work and about how health services are delivered and what works and what doesn't work. It's about care pathways, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all those different. It's also about clinical trials and new devices and so on. And we have a website. So the website itself will provide information about different events and activities that are going on, but will also have resources up there so that they can be shared around and adapted so that different people can use them. So what's the point in getting involved with researchers? Um, Somebody put this call out on Twitter last year, and I just loved the responses. Now, some of these might not resonate with you at all, but I just chose two of them that I thought really resonated with what people said to me when I would have been working with people with dementia, or I would have been working with people with intellectual disabilities. The kinds of responses that came back very much echo this, and these would be two people living with arthritis, actually, in Canada, as far as I can remember. And one is to bring meaning to the misery I've suffered. I know that sounds harsh, but it's why it's important that researchers don't take my involvement lightly or to engage me meaningfully, or else this means suffering that same misery twice. So it's that idea of actually turning your own experience into something in order to protect other people from having to go through what you went through. And like I say, with people with dementia saying to me, listen, I know it's too late for me for some kind of miracle cure or anything like that, but I just couldn't live with myself if I thought I didn't do anything to stop other people having to go through what I went through. And the other response, and there's loads of responses to this, by the way, but this is just one more. And I think it really captures why we do PPI. Integration of lived experience, a way of knowing, into our understanding of pain and complex human conditions is necessary, yet often missing. We need the science/research, the clinical training/expertise, and the invaluable knowledge gained from patients' experiences and insights. So this isn't about the public voice somehow superseding the researcher voice or the clinician voice. This is about those voices getting together in order to move a lot further than anybody can on their own. And just in really practical terms, well, how do I get involved in research? The reality is that we start by figuring out, well, what is it we do research on? Like, what do we need to know? What's actually really fundamentally important to us? So we can start there in terms of having those conversations and building that partnership and figuring out, right, well, what are the things that we don't know yet, or what is the kind of change we want to see? So what kind of research would we do that can actually start that conversation, can start that movement? And then it can be about helping with the recruitment. It can be about taking a look at the kind of findings and understanding where they're coming from. It might be about disseminating the results, or it might be about having some kind of pathway to impact in terms of policy or in terms of practice. So what it could mean for you, it means you could be helping to shape what research gets done. It might be about bringing focus and funding to fibromyalgia. Because remember, this is there's like one fund, let's say, and that people with all kinds of different conditions are all applying to that one fund. That by you getting involved with researchers, that together you can bring a focus and funding to fibromyalgia by actually coming up with really solid, really interesting and very practical research. Also, it keeps people involved in studies. So if people with a lived experience of a condition are actually helping to shape the communications around a study, that it stops people dropping off that study because other people like them are telling them why it's important and why they should stick with it. And it's not that researchers can't do that communication, but they just can't do it as meaningfully as somebody who's living with the condition and say, actually, well, this is what's important to me. So if we talk to other people about that, then that might resonate with them more than just saying, well, we need you to keep with the study because of scientific rigor or something like that. It's about building a better understanding of fibromyalgia. It's about making research more understandable to people with fibromyalgia. And it's also helping to turn research into changes in treatment and policy. So these are all the potentials. These are all the things that we could actually get by working together. Are we going to get them? That tells me now I'm finished, because that's an advertisement. That's just telling me who pays my bills, and that it's the Irish Research Council and the HRB, and Trinity themselves also help to fund it. But this also reminds me of the slide that's not here, which is one of the reasons why I am here, and Orla is smiling at me. The thing about it is, there will be researchers who you will meet who will be fantastic. You will like them. They'll be doing really interesting research. They will understand you and your lived experience, and you'll have this fantastic, worthwhile relationship with them that will grow and change, and possibly even just change the way you think about either research or your own condition or what you're doing. Those are just a subsection of the researchers you will meet if you get involved in this. There will be researchers who are very nice, but just don't really understand this. There will be researchers who are just doing it for the money, and that they don't really want to get involved in partnership, but they are forced to be involved in partnership because of the funding. You will meet people who are fantastic and they're really good and they're good at doing partnership, but you just don't like them. And that's absolutely fine. So you'll meet all of this, in terms of when we say that everybody's experience of fibromyalgia is different, every researcher is different. There's variety everywhere. And that the thing is, what we are trying to do in PPI Ignite is we're trying to turn every researcher into that first type. But we know that we can't, but we're trying our best to try and turn as many of them as possible into that first type. But the thing is, it's important, I think, to remember that you have a role in this relationship. So it's going right back to the start where I was talking about what I was talking about with Kerry. That idea that, yes, we really, really want these to be good partnerships. Some researchers are better at building good partnerships than others, but that you are not some kind of passive recipient of this partnership. You are part of this partnership. And it's really important that you articulate what you want and what you don't want, what they can expect from you and what they can't expect from you, and that you feel confident to be yourself in all of that kind of messy glory that is, but that to articulate that to researchers and to try to build this relationship. That's not going to happen overnight. And I appreciate that you've all got enough going on in your lives as well. So here's this bloke saying, oh yeah, you have to put all this extra effort into this relationship. But the reality is that in order for this to be really meaningful, and in order to be able to achieve some of the kind of goals that are needed, then everybody needs to put some work into that. And sometimes it's more the researcher putting the work in. Sometimes it's more the person living with the condition putting the work in. But actually, it's really worthwhile when people work together and really figure out what it is we're doing, why we're doing it, and the potential of what we could achieve if we work closely together, and in a sense where we can actually achieve something that none of us on our own would ever be able to achieve. That's the real prize here. So I think that's probably my time up, is it, Orla? Yeah. So I'm going to stick around while... Yeah. So I'm going to stick around while you're doing your next focus group, because I'm going to be listening on those. But my details are up here, and I'm also up on Twitter, so I'm on the back of the brochure there. If people want to reach out, or if they want to poke me with a stick, please feel free to do that.